Hey, it's Alex Brown from Steel City Sports Talk, and today I'm going to be going over my position previews for the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiving corps. If you have not seen my partner Ryan's wide receiving position preview for the Pitt Panthers, uh, if you have not watched that already, I encourage you to do so because it was a great video and has garnered a lot of views already, as we have been very excited and happy with the production of views that all of our videos have gotten so far in the position previews as we work through the offenses for both the Panthers and the Steelers. And pretty soon we'll be going over the defenses position by position, as we'll probably start that later next week as we look forward to that. As we're almost done with the offenses, we got tight ends, offensive line, and then we'll be done, and we'll be heading over to the defensive side. But it's right around the corner. Football season is right around the corner, folks. We got preseason football starting up here in the NFL. Training camps are going on for the Pitt Panthers in college. That's in full swing. We got everything's going on now. We got the overreaction is real too. The overreaction with Pitt and the overreaction with the Steelers is real. Kenny Pickett news every day. Kendon Slovis gets carted off. It seems like he's brushed with death one day on the practice field for Pitt, and he's back on the field again the next day. So he's okay, folks. But the overreaction's real, and that's when you know people are excited and football is back, college and professional, and it's exciting times. And let's keep it going here with the position previews as we get started here with the wide receivers of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And let's get started with the $36 million man and Deontay Johnson. Once again, I apologize for the videos that we got because the NFL copyrights everything, and they don't let anybody take any videos from games or anything from last year. No highlights from there, so we'll be taking college videos, and so we work with what we got. But thank you for listening, and we really do appreciate it as we continue as we get started here today. But Deontay Johnson entering his fourth year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, under contract for this year already. He gets a 2-year extension that will take him through the 2024 season. And by that point, he'll be 28 years old. He'll be an unrestricted free agent to start the 2025 season. Over that free agency in that March, he'll be 29 years old. So the Steelers got him for the next 3 years, 26, 27, 28 years old, and we got him for the prime of his career. And so he'll be making, starting next year, an average of $18.355 million per year. And he gets a nice signing bonus. In 2022, which is this season, he gets a $17.5 million signing bonus with a base salary of $1.5 million. And the cap hit stuff, it's all weird from there with the cap at the dead cap, but that's basically what he gets. So he's making over $18 million over the next 2 years, and Steelers get him for 3 years under contract, and they got their franchise guy basically. He's 5'10", 183. Steelers have him for 3 years out of Toledo. Some good players come out of Toledo. So they've had some decent guys that have come out of there. I believe Alvin Kamara. It was either Alvin Kamara or Kareem Hunt that came out of Toledo. But last year, Deontay Johnson really came into form. Deontay Johnson had 1,161 receiving yards last year. He had 8 touchdowns, and he really was pretty impressive. And it was an exciting. It was Kareem Hunt that came out of Toledo, by the way, Kareem Hunt. But it was an exciting year for the Steelers offensively for the first half. And then once Big Ben started to tail off, and you could really see how his age was getting to him, and he just didn't have it anymore. And it really reflected on the offense, as it really was Big Ben's offense. Matt Canada didn't have enough skin in the game on that offense. He didn't have enough say. And I think once Matt Canada gets his full reins of the offense this year, we're really going to see, hopefully we'll see some improvement here. But Deontay Johnson, he was a Pro Bowl year last year, and his stats prove that. And his contract is indicative of that as well, as he really had a pretty impressive year. And we're looking for more of that this year, as he's the number one in the Steelers' offense until someone else proves that differently. But it's his position to lose at the top of the wide receiving depth chart. And I think you're looking at a guy that over the next 3 years is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. And And that's exactly what the Steelers need, because you can have that great run game all you want. Najee Harris is going to be there, and he's going to be great. But you need that presence on the wide receiving side of the ball to make the defense feel threatened by it. It needs to be enough where they're threatened. It needs to be enough where they don't have 7 guys in the box ready for the run every time, every first, second down. You need to have that threat that the wide receivers can beat you, that they can beat you on any time, any place, and you have guys that can do it. And Deontay Johnson is probably the biggest threat the Steelers have as of right now to opposing defenses, as he is the Steelers wide receiver 1. And Chase Claypool, we'll talk about him next. Chase Claypool made waves over the summer when he said he was a top 3, get this, a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. That's coming from a guy who had 860 receiving yards last year and just 2 touchdowns. He's a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. Okay. He's 6'4", 238 pounds. He has all the tools. He has all the talent that's necessary to be able to claim that. But he hasn't proven that last year. And obviously Big Ben was a big drawback last year to the offense. But the offense was still able to get a Pro Bowler. We just saw Deontay Johnson almost had 1,200 wide receiving yards. And he was a Pro Bowler. Chase Claypool had the same quarterback. Where was he? And he just wasn't good enough last year. He truly wasn't. Really, really disappointing, because he had a worse year by a lot than he did the previous in 2020. He had 873 wide receiving yards. It's only a 13-yard difference in that. So, I mean, you might say that's not a lot, Alex. But he had 7 more touchdowns in 2020. So his wide receiving threat in the red zone was non-existent. He was non-existent threat in the red zone. So I think this year he really has to prove himself. He said he gave himself a prediction that he's going to get over 1,300 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it this year. That'd be awesome. And the Steelers need that. I mean, they need as much as they can get. You need success. You need wins. You get that by having wide receivers and talent on the offense that is able to produce points consistently, and is able to produce threats consistently. Is entering its 3rd year with the Steelers. Really kind of a make or break kind of year in terms of it dictates your future. If he has a great year this year, like Deontay Johnson did last year in his 3rd year, he could be getting a contract next year like Deontay did for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years. Lock him up as a franchise guy. But if he doesn't, Steelers could revoke his 5th-year option. He's only under contract for next year, and then he could be on his own after that. But he needs a good year this year, and he's a 2nd-round pick from 2020, 49th overall, out of Notre Dame. All the talent, just needs to execute it, and he's all the confidence as well. He's been talking the talk this summer. Now he just needs to walk the walk, and I think he can do it. But he needs to be, but it also comes back to the quarterback. But I think this year, if he's open, I think the Steelers have enough talent at the quarterback position, whether it's Trubisky or Pickett, and let's say even Rudolph, because Rudolph has looked great in camp. No interceptions in camp so far through any of the drills, contrary to everyone else by a lot. I think they have all the talent to be able to find him when he's open, and he's going to have a lot more targets without Juju this year, and I think he has all the opportunities that he needs to be able to make himself that top 3 wide receiver in the league, but he just has to show it. George Pickens, we're going to talk about next. George Pickens, drafted this year by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver out of Georgia. And in Georgia, it was a little bit different his time there. First 2 years, he got progressively more time on the field. His first year was his best year. His freshman year was his best year, though. He had played in 12 games. He was injury prone in college. That's a concern. But nobody really talks about that, though. But just looking at this, he was injured a lot in college. His freshman year was his most productive year because he was healthy the most. He played 12 games. He had 49 receptions, but he had 727 receiving yards, which is average of 15 yards a catch, and he had 8 touchdowns. His sophomore year, he played 8 games. He had 36 receptions. That's not a lot, but he had 513 yards, which is 14 yards a catch, and he had 6 touchdowns. And then his junior year, which is his final year last year at Georgia, he only played 4 games, so he played 4 less games every season to find himself in his final year at Georgia with playing just 4 games, which was at the end of the year because he tore his ACL in spring practices, and he was able to work his way back throughout the year to become healthy as Georgia went on their playoff run. Last 4 games he was there for the national championship game, and he had a 42-yard touchdown pass in the national championship game. So he was able to work himself back and have a productive ending to his career at Georgia, and as that will be in history books there at Georgia. But in that last 4 games, he had only 5 receptions, but he had 107 yards, and which is an average of over 20 yards per catch. So George had flashes of dominance, and it's really an interesting pick because it's a high risk, high reward kind of pick because he was picked in the second round. So you're expecting a pretty big talent here. And the Steelers have been known for developing wide receivers at a prolific rate over definitely the Mike Tomlin era. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Antonio Brown. You got Emmanuel Sanders back in the day. Mike Wallace. So many guys that they've been able to develop over the years to really be great wide receivers. Martavis Bryant even, before he had his own off-the-field struggles. So I think George Pickens, there's an expectation there's success, but he has to be healthy first for him to be anywhere near productive on the field, and that's what's going to come first. But he has, as seen with Claypool, and really all these wide receivers, they're all talented. They all have the talent, but Pickens has the size to make him a great red zone threat. He's 6'3", as he said, 200 pounds. He's not going to be pushed around that easy. He's fast. And I think with injuries in college, I think Jalen Waddle kind of nullifies some of those fears. Jalen Waddle, a former Alabama wide receiver drafted in 2021, didn't play at all really for most of that year as he was battling with injuries the entire season. And yet he was drafted in the first round by the Miami Dolphins last year, was one of the top wide receivers in the NFL, I think it was a top 25 wide receiver in the NFL last year in his rookie year, which is really impressive. He had over 1,000 receiving yards. So I think, is that realistic for George Pickens to be expected of this year? I don't think so. He's not number one wide receiver on this team like Waddle was back in Miami last year. But I think you could expect probably about 800 yards from George Pickens. I think that'd be an awesome first year. And if he gets 6 to 8 touchdowns, I think that'd be fantastic first year for George Pickens. As it's exciting to have some great young wide receiving talent on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and hopefully much success this year and moving forward. I think it's a great opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers to have George Pickens on the roster. Another guy they drafted this year is Calvin Austin out of Memphis. He's definitely a different build than George Pickens. He's 5'9", 162, but he's a speedy guy, and he had a lot of success in college over his time at Memphis. 2021 was his best year as he got better each year. And even in 2020, we'll start in 2020 during his junior year, he had 1,053 yards, 16.7 average per catch, and he had 11 touchdowns. Fantastic year. Really exciting year for for Calvin Austin, and a year where he really was able to get a lot more targets, a lot more receptions. He had 63 receptions that year. He only had 17 his sophomore year. So he's really given a lot more opportunities at Memphis, and he really was able to produce in a great way for Memphis as Memphis got better. Yeah, it was a great year for Memphis, too, in the American Conference. And in 2021, last year he had 74 receptions as he played in all 12 games. Previous year he played 11. He got 1,149 receiving yards at 15.5 yards per catch. He had a little less touchdowns production, but he had a couple more rushing yards, and he had a rushing touchdown as well. As he had about 150 more yards from scrimmage than he did the previous season. And so I think Calvin Austin, as we've seen in camps, Kenny Pickett said the other days, it's tough to cover him. He's always open. He's a slippery guy in the slot. I think that's an excellent slot guy. The smaller guy you got in the slot, I think that's a really interesting find. For a lot of teams, you look at Hunter Renfrow with the Las Vegas Raiders. He's a smaller guy, but he's able to be so productive in the slot. The last year, he was a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. You look at Cole Beasley, who's made himself a name for himself over his careers. He made it into his 30s as a great slot wide receiver in the NFL. So many guys are like that you can fit into the slot. Maybe as they're not big enough to maybe be great on the outside, but they're great in the inside, and they're able to make so many productive plays and to get open. That's the most important part of a wide receiver. You got to be open to make the catches and to be productive. And I think Calvin Austin has all the tools to be able to do that as well. And I think he's going to be a great find for the Steelers this season. And that's an exciting find. It really is. I think he's going to be great find for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Anthony Miller, another journeyman guy, was drafted in 2018, I should say, by the Chicago Bears. Second round, 51st overall. So a lot of high talent, high drafted wide receiving talent for the Pittsburgh Steelers that's on the team this year. As Anthony Miller's looking for a spot. He's 5'11", 199 pounds. He played his first 3 years in Chicago. His best year was in 2019 when he had 52 receptions for 656 yards, only had 2 touchdowns. That's about 12.5 yards per catch, though. But he bounced around last year. He was with 2 different teams. He only started 3 games the entire year. So now he's looking to get a spot with the Pittsburgh Steelers. There was a video at the beginning of camp that showed him catch 6 balls in his hands from the gun as they were practicing basically catching balls through punts or kickoff returns. So if he gets a job like that, that'd be great. But he can also slide in occasionally. As he has had NFL experience. He went to college at Memphis too. So another Memphis player to go along with Calvin Austin that made it to the NFL. So I think with the Pittsburgh Steelers, if he's able to get on the roster, he should have a good shot to get on the 53-man roster. And if he get on as a special teams player, at least that'd be interesting. And if he gets on as a maybe a fifth wide receiver for the Steelers, he could be productive. He really could be. He's 27. He's had NFL experience, as I said, and he could be able to slot in certain formations. If somebody gets hurt, God forbid somebody gets hurt, he slots in and gets a couple of targets. He could be productive, and I think that's an interesting play there. He's also has a relationship with Mitchell Trubisky as he played with him in Chicago, so maybe a little bit of rapport there. They can transfer that chemistry to here, so that'll be interesting as well to see. And last guy I'm going to go over here as guys that can have a legitimate shot to make the 53-man roster is Miles Boykin. Miles Boykin was drafted in 2019 by the Baltimore Ravens in the 3rd round, 93 overall. He went to Notre Dame as well for college, and in Notre Dame he wasn't a bad player. He played there for 4 years. In 2018 was his senior year. He had 59 receptions for 872 yards, about 15 yards per catch. He had 8 touchdowns, and that led him to be drafted in the 3rd round by the Baltimore Ravens. He's 6'4", another big guy, 6'4", 220, and he played on different sides of rivalries with the Pittsburgh Steelers, played a little bit. He was on the Browns roster last year for a little bit as well, and he's excited to be on the Steelers side of the rivalries this year, and I think he's going to be an interesting find because he had some fire with him. He had some fire. His best year in the NFL was in 2020 with the Ravens. Played 16 games, started 13 of them, and he had 33 targets, caught 19 of them for 266 yards, but he got 4 touchdowns out of those targets. So this is a guy that's a great red zone target, maybe can slot in as well as like Anthony Miller in certain formations, but he's got that fire that you need to see in a guy that's bounced around a little bit, hasn't really found a home, and maybe the Steelers can be his home for the next couple years. Maybe he can get a couple touchdowns here and there, make himself productive here with the Steelers, because the Steelers' offense of production in the red zone is going to be a key this year. And it's going to be really a rubber stamp on, is Matt Canada the answer for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the coordinator position? Because if he's not, if they don't get a great red zone rapport this year and they don't get a lot of production from the wide receivers and running backs this year and the quarterbacks and the offense as a whole, he's going to be gone and he's going to be out on the street. Not homeless, but he'll find a home somewhere, but he's not going to be the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers next year if the Steelers don't have a top 15 offense in the league. And I don't know how you can't with the talent you got, at least here at the wide receiver position. And that about wraps it up for today. Went a little bit long, but lots to go over with the Steelers. And tight ends will be a little bit shorter later this week. They'll be a lot shorter, I think, later this week as we got Pat Freiermuth, Zach Gentry, among a couple others. as we plug along here with the Pittsburgh Steelers position previews. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.